But I'll tell you from my line of work, what you're mostly finding is when anyone gets nervous, it's just because they're out of their wheelhouse. If you're an executive, even in a small, medium, or large business, and you say, I want to try more conscious leadership, I want to make sure I'm trying to put more natural processes or balanced or organic processes in here, they start. And if the numbers start shaking and they feel uncomfortable, they just go back to like top down command and control, machine oriented business because it's just what they know. So I think that's the biggest challenge facing us as a population of business people right now. And that's one of the bigger things that we need to get through to change.
Welcome to Changing the Channel with Joe Garner, a show about shifting our individual and collective beliefs on what is possible for the future of humanity. As our understanding of how our reality continues to shift, we are at a point of reunification between science and spirituality. What does the world look like when we break free from the generational trauma that has kept most humans playing small for thousands of years and step into our full power as the co-creators of this reality? I always ask that you keep an open mind with this podcast. Ask yourself what resonates with my truth at this time and what does not. Respect your intuition, but see if you can get through the whole show because there might be that little nugget buried deep in the conversation that unlocks something for you. Welcome everybody back to Changing the Channel. I am joined by Sam Drauschak. He is a co-founder and chief process scientist at Truvle, whose mission is to assist businesses in reducing wasteful activity by providing them with innovative tools, software, and expert content. He's also the writer of a book called Becoming a Conscious Business, which I think we'll probably talk a little bit more about today. So welcome to the show, Sam. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me.
So what was the spark behind writing Becoming a Conscious Business? Like, take us through a little bit of your path and how you got to writing this book.
Sure. So I was at a part of my career where I was absorbing this process science concept in every way that I could, not only through my professional interactions, but just talking about it constantly on my free time. And for me, this book it basically demanded to be written as a way for me to organize all of the thoughts I was having, the experiences I was having, and really as a means of processing a lot of this knowledge that was integrating in my own body. So for me, it was more of a call to self-actualize. And I really had to get all these thoughts in paper in a cohesive form. And through sharing that experience, because there's a lot of my own personal life in the book, I was able to really hone in on what I was trying to say. And it really helped. It was a big milestone in my personal and professional journey.
So what's the idea behind the book? What is your perspective on a conscious business?
Sure. So the punchline of the book, not to give it away, but it's becoming a conscious business is something that we are actively as humans evolving into. So to me, it's me trying to articulate what is the next stage of evolution that humans are becoming a part of. We've spent most of our lives being told that we're the top of this food chain, that we're the apex of all things that have existed on Earth. But in my account in the book, it's kind of watching as we start to evolve into the next big thing. And to me, becoming a conscious business is starting to touch on how studying process and studying nature, you start to see these patterns. And ultimately, we will become a business together, a business organism, and we will become a conscious business ourselves.
That is fascinating. And I've had these ideas. I have a blog and I've written a couple different blogs about the idea of using nature to essentially guide how we build this next generation of businesses and the understanding of the wisdom of nature, from a human perspective, roughly 4 billion years of intelligence on this planet alone, let alone other planets and other, places in the galaxy. So they nature, the universe, consciousness has figured out a lot of very important ways on how to organize everything in the universe. And if we align with that intelligence, it makes the business process, it makes, this interaction that we have to have between humans a lot simpler, a lot easier, and I think a lot better for both aspects of that interaction. Are you feeling a little bit stuck? Like you've been doing the work, but you're just not sure what the next steps are? Right now, I'm offering coaching through meditation and intuition to tap into your soul to get the hints about where your life is heading towards. What are the next steps for you? So if you're interested, check out the show notes and set up a time to just check. I've got a free 30-minute discovery call that you can sign up for. I look forward to hearing from you, and please feel free to reach out.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And
Who
even just more efficient, I mean, one could say. I mean, if one studies natural models, as humans, we've tried a lot of things with our almost infinite creativity. But in general, there's millions of years, as you mentioned, of evolution and processes that were optimized over time. And if we study those models, there's still a lot to learn in terms of applying to human society, business process, just business operating models, market operating models. There's still a tremendous open space there to really draw on the richness of natural processes to guide us.
Right. So let's touch a little bit on those processes. Give us maybe one or two examples of how nature has designed a process and then how it can be extrapolated into the business world.
Sure. So I think a simple analogy to start this conversation for agriculture is this idea that we thought for many, many years monocropping was very efficient, where you just take fields and you just plant one crop at a time and you could really focus on that crop being successful. The business analog would be when, Ford first came up with the assembly line with Model T saying, we don't need all this variation. If we just produce the same thing, we can understand how to scale it in mass. So there was a revolution there, especially around the industrial revolution, about this whole I'll just call it monocropping for this example concept where we have better controls and we have better outcomes if we can just have less variables. Well, in nature, that's absolutely not the case. And that's played out over the last few decades where this idea of permaculture or ecosystems that are self regenerative, and there's a lot more complexity at face value in looking at systems where you have multiple components that are working in harmony. But that's exactly what's happening. So monocropping was shown to be very fragile over time because disease and natural resistance made it actually not as profitable as we thought. And the same thing with the Model T and the assembly line. Business is now evolving past that. So we talk about using natural models. How do we build our businesses so that they're more like gardens and you have all the right pieces? They're self-regenerative. Waste is being used by different parts of the system. And that I know that's a very broad, so I'm happy to go into more examples. But generally, we're figuring out how we can mimic more of the natural complexity and the self-regenerative and sustainability aspects of natural processes and business processes.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I love the interplay between those two and how you're bringing that into existence today. So maybe that was definitely a very broad topic. So maybe let's bring it down into a little bit more of a digestible topic because yeah, every business should be necessarily, trying to reuse, trying to build not just sustainable, but, something that is able to be reproduced and for long, long times be able to be, essentially continued on in its use. So, give us a little bit more of a concrete, maybe a smaller model of how that applies in somebody's business. Maybe something that you've done already before.
Sure. So a lot of process improvement is trying to understand how the market is demanding products from businesses. So when I say that, I'm not going to have like a super specific example where I like ripped up a whole business and now I've made a more permaculture model or a more sustainable model. But generally, what we're looking for to make it more tangible is a lot of times it's pacing. So, what is the market actually demanding versus what you're producing? So, for a business to overproduce items that the market is not really demanding in a certain time, that would be wasteful as a principle. So, you're trying to understand, well, how do we know how the market is ordering and what demand and what volume they need? And you match your production to meet it. So, that's one example where you can take a business that might be producing unconsciously or overproducing items, whatever it is, and try to scale it back and then create transparency mechanisms so they can see what the market is doing. So mechanisms like that, and there's a bunch of those simple ones, and a lot of it's from lean process improvement, a lot of it's integrating all sorts of different process disciplines, but it all lines up with this idea that you need to be in balance with the environment around you. And that's from a consumption, from a resources, from a labor perspective, because being in balance with the entire marketplace, not just within the company, is part of how you create a sustainable ecosystem for your employees and for your customers.
Right. And is there evidence that this system, when you kind of align more with the natural way that things have been designed, that it does create more, if you want to call it abundance or profit, or that it is at least more not necessarily sustainable, but again, we exist in this framework of late stage capitalism at this point.
Yeah.
How do we get companies to switch and see the benefit of aligning with a more natural way of doing things?
Yeah. So first, absolutely, it's across the board. Sustainability, profitability, morale, culture. When you start to look at how you can bring more balance and consciousness to your business model, all of the things that investors typically want in a traditional sense will improve. And there's been lots of books and there's lots of writing for people who are looking for it. The second part of your question about how do we get people on board, a lot of getting people on board is more an issue of breaking them of old patterns. Because what we're seeing today is a very entrenched business paradigm that really started around the early 1900s and has just been what's taught in business schools, what's taught to young executives and all the baby boomers and how they mentored all of their people. So with a lot of things, when you're changing your methods and you're changing it in kind of a radical way, and there's a lot of reasons to become more radical in the last 30 years because of technology. We can talk about different, things that are happening. But a lot of it is just moving old entrenched ideas out of the way. That's really how we're going to see a lot of this come up because the data's there, the case study's there, everything that people want is there. But I'll tell you from my line of work, what you're mostly finding is when anyone gets nervous, it's just because they're out of their wheelhouse. If you're an executive, even in a small, medium, or large business, and you say, I want to try more conscious leadership, I want to make sure I'm trying to put more natural processes or balanced or organic processes in here, they start, and if the numbers start shaking and they feel uncomfortable, they just go back to like top-down command and control, machine-oriented business because it's just what they know. So I think that's the biggest challenge facing us as a population of business people right now, and that's one of the bigger things that we need to get through to change.
Yeah, yeah, I think it definitely starts both from the top down and from the bottom up. I mean, as consumers, I think also start to realize how important it is to use conscious businesses and to vote with their dollar. I think you're going to start to see, a ton of new companies, companies that are a little bit more forward thinking, companies that are interested in becoming a little bit more conscious. They're going to start garnering a lot more revenue, a lot more of the share in revenue, and it's going to be incredible to see. I also think, and I'd love to get your perspective on this, as technology continues to more or less level the playing field for smaller and medium-sized companies, those companies that maybe have the ability to change, to shift a little bit easier than the much larger, 50 or 100,000 employee companies. Do you see the role of technology becoming more and more important as we shift into this more conscious landscape for business?
Yes, absolutely do. And that's part of the major trend that technology has been changing. In the past, larger players were entrenched because there were so many barriers to entry. But now with
Right.
technology, you can easily create a larger company through decentralized global activity. You have so many more access to knowledge and just capability and experience, proxy experience basically through technology that smaller players can be more creative, they can be more innovative. And from just like zero to maybe a few years, they can compete with larger players in the marketplace. And that creates a much more competitive environment where the bigger players are not just going to be able to rely on their morals, they're going to be forced to evolve or they're going to be pushed out of the market through fiercer competition. And technology is a lot of what's allowed that, all of what I just described, right? Having all these resources, having more connectivity, having more virtual work environments. A lot of this is just leading to this exponential growth of radical innovation, just radical ideation. And yes, I really do believe the younger generation of companies, whereas all the companies we know now in the Fortune 1000, they've been around and they took maybe 10, 20, 30 years to come up. The next Fortune 1000 10 years from now, they could have all started in the last 10 years. You just don't know.
Right. Yeah, that would be fascinating to see this massive shift, and this is what I think some people should probably be prepared for as well. And that's it, it all depends on your paradigm and how you're viewing things. If you are preparing for a massive shift in consciousness, you are probably aware that there's going to be a lot of opportunity in these newer businesses to invest, to spend, to promote, to help. And if you are entrenched in that old system where, you just put your money into the S&P or, how whatever that you're normally have been putting your money into, the road might be a little bit rockier for you as we come into this shifting of paradigms, this new consciousness that's happening on the planet.
Yeah, I mean, it's happening a lot faster. And it's really hard, I think, for people because our parents and our grandparents, time was exponentially slower for them
Mhm.
because they were without internet. I mean, that's really the biggest thing if you had to sum it up in our lifetime, which is the we went from having no internet down to complete internet as we know it. And in
Yeah.
general, you cannot it's our reality, so it becomes normalized, but you can't underestimate how slow we've been conditioned to think reality moves based on the generations that came before us and taught us versus how quickly things are going to evolve in our lifetime. And like you mentioned, if you're not open and training and cultivating adaptability, you're going to have a very tough time because things are going to change and everything that you've been taught in a lot of ways. You mentioned investing in the S&P 500, for example, but just total financial intelligence is going to be different in our generation. And there's no way that anyone could teach us because they just have no idea. So we have to be confident. We have to be assertive moving into this new world because there's not going to be any historic precedent to give us guidance. We're going to have to really take it head on and take it with this sort of gentleness and this openness, or it's going to be a very tough ride.
Yeah, exactly. And I think there's no real historic precedence for, this iteration of humanity in this specific time and space. But it's my belief that if you're able to tap into the higher aspects of yourself, if you're able to, kind of connect with what people consider their soul or the intelligence of the universe, all the answers exist. Like everything, there is nothing new under the sun. So all the answers to all these problems, these issues, these new technologies that humanity is facing, if we listen to those who are able to connect and really tune into the intelligence of not just nature, but the intelligence of the entirety of the universe, I believe that we can make this as smooth a process as possible.
I also believe that practically, though, I hope that people can come around. I mean, I think the challenge to actualizing that is there's a several hundred years of conditioning that people have to strip away so they can actually touch into that universal intelligence. But yes, I'm also in agreement with you what you said.
Beautiful. Yeah, and that's the cool part. I mean, the technology is here. Not only is it helping businesses, but it's also helping those who are helping others get to this point where they can see a new reality. They can see a different timeline. They can change their channel into this newer reality. And again, from I think both of our perspectives, all all these changes, they might seem difficult for a couple of years or maybe even a little bit longer than that. But on the other side of that is a beautiful, more transformed humanity. It's definitely a world where I want to exist and live in, and that's the reality that I'm beginning to and have been tuning into.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's just that it's like you mentioned, the transition state is very frightening for people. And I think the shifting consciousness is going to be a lot of letting go of a lot of things that we've been taught and being ready to move into a new space and being open to what's coming.
Right. Now, do you have any practices that help you tune into your higher self, the wisdom of the universe, anything along those lines?
So for me, a lot of my practice is being very deeply immersed in process data, which is not a practice that is a very common one to articulate. But I'm as a process
Hmm.
scientist, process data is data that describes reality. Because when you talk about what a process is not static. It's studying the nature of things in motion, reality in motion. And I'm steeped in that all the time. So when we talk about understanding our higher nature, for me, it's having an unclouded view of reality as it is, not as we expect it to be. So my practice is kind of one of, I mean, I do practice meditation and a lot of common techniques to kind of clear my mind and get in better touch with my body. But generally, I found a lot of insight in my practice of just understanding and challenging myself to continue to understand and push my edges on what is reality, what can we grasp of reality, and how can we grasp that reality without expectation.
Beautiful. Let's talk a little bit about what you've been able to grasp and what are maybe a couple takeaways that people who are listening can garner from what you've learned about the intelligences and where we are in the business world. So let's take a look maybe 3 to 5 years from now. what does the business world look like from your perspective?
Yeah. So 3 to 5 years from now, the business world is going to not on its surface look a lot different than it looks now, but it's going to be evolving a lot more quickly. It will be a lot more adaptable. It will be less rigid and it will be more present. Now, when you usually talk about presence and the mindset of presence, you usually make it into a personal context. So, what does that look like in a business context? Well, just like if I told you, hey, why don't you do a 10-year plan with me? And you might think, well, that's very difficult if you're in a mind state of trying to remain present because I don't know where I'm going to be tomorrow. And if I'm trying to remain anchored in the space and be open to opportunity, planning that far ahead, it seems like a wasteful exercise. And largely it is. Businesses are the same and they will become more conscious and more present as we go forward because all these principles align for businesses just like people, which is that businesses are not going to have 10-year plans. Businesses are not going to have 5-year plans that they have to report out to investors. Business being more present is just businesses that are reading the marketplace. They're plugged into their people. They're plugged into their customers. Their data flowing constantly. There's going to be increased transparency. And you're going to see businesses be a lot more, like I said, adaptable. But what that looks like is changing, decentralizing, recombining. There's going to be a lot more movement and a lot more change. So businesses today, they can work on projects that go 4 or 5 years long, depending on the kind of business and the pace that they're used to move. That's all going to compress. And it's already happening, but in 3 to 5 years, it's going to be even more intense. So if you're part of a business organism, your rate of change is always going to be constant.
Wow, that seems uh, a little bit scary, but also a very exciting from my perspective. Because again, we don't bump into these old legacy businesses that are not evolving with the evolving consciousness of humanity. Again, the businesses are evolving just as fast as the humans' consciousnesses are evolving, and that does seem to be a much better process than humans consciousnesses evolving and the businesses taking 5 or 10 or 15 years to kind of catch up to that. And yeah, I think that's going to be a very interesting time for a lot of businesses.
Yeah. And I also, and this is sort of the becoming a conscious business perspective we started the show with, I think businesses are actually going to lead the charge to become more conscious. So it won't be humans evolving and then businesses evolving as a result of that. It's actually businesses are already going to be evolving faster than humans. And this is my perspective on what's happening here. So when you become part of a conscious business, it doesn't matter where you are independently. The business's consciousness is going to start evolving faster than we are able to process right now. So it's going to bring us along. And we're already seeing that with some of these larger businesses that are major. They see more data, they have a different sense of linear time. And when you're just a part of it, it opens your eyes. How they run, the decisions that your colleagues are making, that your management's making, it's all insight into this larger consciousness that's forming in these massive businesses. So I think they'll pull us along more than the other way around, is my opinion.
That's interesting. I haven't heard that idea before, that the businesses are going to actually lead this consciousness. I would think it would almost be the opposite, where the humans inside the business are leading the conscious effort to shift that business's consciousness. But um, I think it's going to be a little bit of both, most likely. But that is
Yeah.
kind of fascinating. The idea that the business is going to be at the leading edge, at the avant garde of this shifting consciousness.
Yeah, and I think part of it is a challenge, and I'm writing another book now to try to like hit another milestone in explaining this. It's this idea that businesses are not just collections of humans and of human intention and will, that they are organisms that we are part of, right? So the analogy I like to give people is your body, what you consider you in this reality, it's just bacterial organisms, right? It's just a number of cells and bacteria that are actually a massive city of transactions and complex interactions that form you collectively. If those bacteria in your body decided to leave your body, they would survive. They can survive outside of you. You can also survive to a certain extent, but eventually, if enough of them leave, then you'll go away. So now think about that, internalize what are you exactly? Like when you look at you in the mirror and you think about that, what are you? Now, when you look at a business, I would ask you the same question. What is a business? When you start to get a number of humans coming together and they're going through complex interactions and they're all working toward a common goal, that organism that you form with them, even if you think, oh, this is just a collection of humans doing it, that's a very human centric view. When you come together and we all start combining, and then the business starts running, whether you individually are part of it or not, it's this new consciousness forming, just like we're a new consciousness of things that are collectively creating us. We all repeat this cycle in nature. And businesses, once they get going at the rate they're get going and they're plugged into the internet and they're just moving and people and things are interacting with them, they're going to start evolving at an exponential rate. And we're a part of that journey. But I would, challenge everyone to think about what part of that journey, and are we always in control? Are we always going to be at the top of that pyramid? And that's sort of the idea of how we're in this path of evolution together.
Right. Yeah. Are we the part or the whole, or are we kind of that middle ground in between? That whole on is kind of the idea behind that.
Or both
And
simultaneously to a certain extent.
exactly. Yeah, that's what the whole on is. You're not only a part, you're also a whole, and you're a whole that's a part of another whole, and it just keeps, turtles all the way up and down. So
Right.
and I like that idea. It kind of what it brings in me is the idea of thought forms, and as humans create these different ideas, it builds in the higher realms of nature these thought forms, and these thought forms are conscious beings. They're conscious entities that exist in this ethereal or astral plane or realm, and that is truly what the business is. It's this idea that basically starts to gain more and more and more momentum, energy, processes, and eventually it's a standalone thing. And that's what we're seeing, especially with legacy businesses, is that, they were created in the 1920s or 30s or 40s, and they're just marching along really almost unconscious of what they're doing and how they're doing it. It's just they have a one track mind. It's how do we make more money? How do we maximize profits? How do we get 10% growth every single year? And this is where these new businesses are going to come in and just uh, almost topple them in the next 5 to 10 years, just because they're thinking at such a higher level than these old, one track minded businesses.
Yeah, we're certainly going to see some of that for sure. And those big boys, though, they're not going to go down easy, but they're definitely have a lot of energy and momentum powering them. So we'll see.
Right, right. Well,
Healthy team
I
for
mean,
life.
like you said, it's adapt or die. Like, that's my mindset, that I think for most businesses, they have to start adapting, because if you're not adapting to this new world, you're going to struggle immensely. It's as if let's take global climate change. If you're a tree and you're used to the rainforest, and all of a sudden that rainforest doesn't exist anymore and you're now in a desert, you either have to adapt or you're going to die. And for most gigantic trees, the ability to adapt from rainforest to desert in one iteration is just not possible. So
Yeah.
it'll be very similar to, that kind of idea, where it's as if the business landscape is like the ecological system, and it's starting to change. We're starting to see that shift and change.
Yeah. A lot of those analogies are incredibly apt, and I agree.
So tell us a little bit about Truvle and what it does and how it helps businesses in this, immensely fast-paced world.
Sure. So Truvle, it was a software company, and really what we're trying to do is we're taking all the practitioner level process science experience that me and my co-founders and my team have, and we're trying to put it into software solutions so we can scale that knowledge and allow those tools to be opened for everyone in the general population, so that there's this lessening of this learning curve and this lessening of this barrier to actually acquire some of these process science skills. And what are those skills? The first product that we're releasing, and we're releasing that product right at the top of the year, is just for process mapping, but it's process mapping with an opinion, and it helps people structure and capture process data so they can start looking at it and compare that data, across different sample sets. And this may start to people's eyes glaze over and they get very bored. So I'll try to be brief with the value of this. But the whole idea is when you can start looking at your world through process data and using the same tools and the same perspective, you get to start seeing these patterns. And that's really what's transformed my life, and it transforms business systems. It transforms everyone, because then you're not working up anecdotes. You're not just going in and working off what your manager told you or what your boss or your mentor told you. It's let's all look at the same process data and start to become scientific about analyzing and understanding what that data is telling us and how we need to change businesses so that they can become more efficient, they can become less wasteful, they can become more sustainable. So really, Truvle is all about just creating those tools, creating accessibility, and really democratizing a lot of nuanced knowledge that, frankly, right now is mostly in the hands of consultants. But mostly, we'd like
Mhm.
to open that up to all businesses.
And when you say processes, like help me understand which processes are right for this kind of designing.
Sure. So I would say all processes, and I will give a little bit more of a definition because the problem with the word process is if I say process, you've got a different view of what that means in your head as long as every single listener, right? And you can look it up and there's
Right.
even multiple definitions. So when I talk about process, I'm talking about pretty much anything in reality. Everything in motion could be described in process terms because it's moving and there's energy powering that movement. But when you talk about practically in businesses, businesses are nothing more than in totality collections of operating processes. So when you talk about what processes, Sam, it's really, well, I would always say start with your core operation. So the processes that actually create the thing, the value for your customers, and then really radiate out from there and capture what every single person in the company is doing, where all the capital in the company is allocated. All of that is process. And if you really just take this to heart and you have quick ways to track all that process, then you can really see and start doing some incredible things.
So that's what Truvle does is it takes this immensely complex and the reason CEOs make a lot of money is because they're able to keep all these processes in somewhat idea of a conscious understanding of how they're all working within this gigantic company. And now you're taking all of that information and making it available to pretty much anybody in the company. Is that
So yes and no right now. So yes, that's our roadmap. We'd love to have it so that eventually all this process knowledge will be available to people so they can make better business decisions. But initially, it's really just tools to help people understand what their processes are and they can start to see what they're working with.
okay?
And that may seem a little counterintuitive, but like you said, the CEOs who are managing successful, adaptable, and evolutionary companies, they're not doing it because they just have this magic bullet business technique. It's because they have a strong awareness of what all their people are doing, what the processes are that make up their business. There's a lot of businesses that don't have that. They actually
Mhm.
don't know what their businesses are doing exactly. They've lost control of it, especially with digitization, globalization. You can't just walk into a building and just see everyone and see what they're up to anymore. So a lot of the tools are really helping people. What is my process? How do I get it on paper? How do I communicate it to myself and other people? And from there, you can start engaging with making it better or just managing it over time.
Yeah, yeah, that sounds like such a helpful and useful thing. And when I had my businesses, I would have loved to been able to just take, all right, let's put down all the processes that we do. Let's put them on paper. Here's who needs to do this. Here's what needs to get done, and
Right.
that would have been very very helpful. I mean, I tried doing it in Excel spreadsheets. I tried doing it on Word documents. I tried doing it by having big meetings and saying, all right, here's what we need to do and get everybody on the same page. But to have something that you can sit down and really just look at, and then it looks like you can pretty much move things around. You can play around with them, like it's
Yes.
drag and drop essentially. And that would be such a helpful tool. That would have been such a helpful tool when I was getting started in the businesses I was doing.
Yeah, you just put your nose right on it. I mean, that is the perfect use case, which is it's anyone out there and it's mostly managers, business owners, large executives. It kind of is a lot of different people and use cases, but it's really the struggle of how do I actually write down this process so that people can reference it accurately? And how do I communicate process information? That's a huge challenge because, like you said, do I put it in Excel? Do I try to draw my own process map? Do I put it in Word? Do I have a video? Do I get on Loom and just talk the whole thing out? People are
Right.
struggling with this all over the place because people need to know what is your process? Like, Joe, what do you want people to do? If I hire a new person, what are they supposed to be doing? It's very challenging, especially in a more digital world. And just having a consistent and structured mechanism to capture that consistently and easily. That's what we're really trying to bring to market now so that people can have a language that they can speak to each other about process and understand themselves and their businesses better.
Beautiful. I like to try to leave it off with a positive note. So, leave us with something. What's the thing that's got you the most excited right now about the future of this shift in consciousness on the planet? What are you looking forward to in this new reality?
Sure. I'm really looking forward to just seeing things that I can't even conceive existing right now. I mean, we're about to have, for those of us alive right now, who are in the middle of our lives, we're about to see stuff from sci-fi movies and even beyond that we've never even imagined. Things are becoming more efficient, they're becoming more connected, technology is iterating exponentially, artificial intelligence and other robotic solutions are becoming an actual reality in our lifetime. And all I can say is it's going to be an incredibly wild ride. And I think if you have the right mindset and you're not let your life be ruled by fear, it's going to be an incredible thing to witness and be a part of. And I think I'm extremely excited to be a part of that.
I agree 100%, and I hope people realize that at a soul level, you chose to come to this place during this shift in consciousness, during this crazy period of going from separation consciousness to unified consciousness. You made a conscious decision, whether you're aware of that or not, to come here during this time. Most people have a gift that they're here to share during this period. So if you're looking to help, find that gift, again, meditate, tap into your intuition, do what Sam has done, because you are driven by exactly what you need to be doing at this very moment. And it's incredible to talk to people who just absolutely know what their mission is, why they're here, and they're making it happen in the world. So I just want to thank you for being such a powerful shift in the consciousness, a player in this shift in consciousness, and really just getting to know who you truly are, and taking action with who you truly are. So I really appreciate it. I appreciate you coming on the show. I will make sure I link any links that you have that you've sent me, including the website for Truvle. If you want to send me links to the books or anything else that you want to promote, certainly send those over. But I really appreciate it, Sam. Thank you for everything you're doing, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Likewise, thank you for having me. It was a great conversation.
Thank you again for listening to Changing the Channel with Joe Garner. If you enjoyed the show, please follow the podcast, hit the bell to know when a new show comes out, share with a friend, and rate us on whatever platform you're tuning in from. It helps get these messages out to more people to create the collective shift in reality we are here to experience. Make sure you interact with the Q&A and poll sections of the show so I can continue to provide content you enjoy. Finally, check out my website in the show notes to become a VIP of Changing the Channel and join the shift that is happening.